Hey, everybody, and welcome to another deep dive. Sometimes the most ordinary things can hide fascinating stories.
Right.
Like today, we're going to be talking about how a neighborhood name can spark huge debates.
Yeah.
We're talking about River Plantation
Mm-hmm.
in Conroe, Texas. And we're going to be using this article called River Plantation in Conroe, Texas, The Sore That Never Heals.
Interesting title.
It's from transam.org. So
Yeah.
this should be pretty interesting, huh?
Yeah, it really makes you think about how the names we give to places, even just neighborhoods, can say so much about uh, deeper values and struggles that are going on in society.
Yeah, you don't really think about it.
No,
Like I never thought about the name of my neighborhood,
yeah.
but now I'm kind of curious about it.
It's like a window into the past, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So to get started, can you tell us what Conroe was like before River Plantation even existed?
Well, way before any European settlers got there, the Conroe area was inhabited by the Akokisa people
Oh, wow. For how long?
for thousands of years.
Wow. It's interesting. The article mentioned that a lot of people today probably wouldn't even know about the Akokisa.
Right.
Like, it really shows you how sometimes certain perspectives or narratives can just totally dominate how we think about a place.
It's true. It makes you realize that, history is usually told from a very limited viewpoint, and it takes real effort to uncover the voices and experiences that have been kind of pushed aside or forgotten.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's jump forward in time a little bit to the 20th century.
Okay.
River Plantation was established in 1967.
A lot going on in 1967.
Oh, yeah, big time,
Yeah.
especially with all the racial tensions and stuff.
Okay, yeah.
A lot of white families were moving to the suburbs like River Plantation.
Yeah, suburbs were booming then.
Oh, yeah. But the article made a point that it wasn't just about moving to a new house.
Right.
It was more about finding a community that reflected their values
Yeah, makes sense.
in this rapidly changing world.
Yeah, and that's where the names they chose for the streets in River Plantation get really interesting.
Okay, how so?
Well, they named a lot of them after Confederate generals,
Oh, wow. Like who?
like Robert E. Lee,
Oh, wow.
Stonewall Jackson, Beauregard.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's really taking us back in time, huh?
Yeah, Braxton Bragg Lane, Jubal Early Lane.
Wow. You don't see those every day. It's almost like they were trying to send a message, don't you think?
It does make you wonder about what their intentions were when they picked those names.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't meant to be a celebration of the Confederacy, it still has an impact.
Oh, yeah.
These names immediately make people think of a very specific time in American history.
Right.
A time that was full of racial division and violence.
It really shows how symbols, even something as simple as a street name, can be so powerful.
Oh, absolutely. And it forces us to ask ourselves, what message are we sending with these symbols, whether we mean to or not? And how do these symbols shape the way we understand our communities and their history?
Yeah. And, it's not just the Confederate street names. The article talks about how Conroe has a pretty messed up history when it comes to racial injustice.
Yeah, it mentions lynchings in the area, which is just a horrible reminder of the racial terror that was happening all over the South.
Yeah, it's awful. And then there was the case of Clarence Brandley.
Yeah, that one was rough.
He was a black man who was wrongly convicted of murder.
Wow.
And he spent years on death row before he was finally exonerated.
That is just tragic. It shows how systemic racism can actually affect the justice system
Yeah.
and lead to terrible consequences for people and entire communities.
So we're seeing a pattern here with the Confederate street names, the racial violence, and Clarence Brandley's case. It's a really disturbing picture of Conroe's past.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, is River Plantation just a reflection of that larger history, or is there something more going on there?
That's the big question, and the article really goes for it with a bold statement.
What does it say?
It says that today, River Plantation is a perpetual symbol of white supremacy.
Whoa, that's intense. But is that oversimplifying things? Does it matter what they intended when they created the neighborhood? When we talk about the impact of symbols.
Those are such important questions, and they're at the heart of this whole debate. It's hard to separate intent from impact, especially when we're dealing with complicated historical legacies.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about what it actually means to be part of the problem, even if you don't personally have racist views.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
makes us think about how we might be contributing to oppressive systems without even realizing it.
Yeah.
And it challenges us to really think critically about how we can challenge those systems and work towards a more just and fair society.
Yeah, yeah. for everyone.
for everyone. Yeah.
It's kind of crazy to think that this isn't all just ancient history. You know,
I know what you mean.
the article brings up something that happened at the River Plantation Country Club
Oh, right.
pretty recently.
Yeah.
It's a Yelp review, and it talks about this incident of racism.
Yeah, that Yelp review really hits home, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It shows how racism is still alive and well today, even in places that seem pretty inclusive.
Yeah. It's hard to believe that stuff like that still happens in 2023.
I know, right?
But it's a real wake-up call that racism can be super subtle.
Absolutely. And those more subtle forms of racism can be the trickiest.
Yeah, how so?
Well, they can be hard to spot and even harder to confront.
It makes you wonder how many times this kind of thing happens and nobody says anything.
Right. It's a scary thought. But that's why it's so important to stay aware and call out racism whenever we see it.
Yeah, no matter how small it seems.
Exactly. So the article doesn't just lay out all these problems in River Plantation. It actually gives some ideas for what the community could do about it.
Oh, okay. Like what?
Well, some of them are pretty radical,
Like what?
like renaming the entire neighborhood.
Whoa, really? Get rid of River Plantation altogether?
Yeah. They think they should pick a name that's more inclusive.
That's a huge change. I bet some people wouldn't be happy about that.
Yeah, and they talk about the streets named after Confederate figures, too.
Oh, yeah? What do they say about that?
They say those should be renamed, too.
I bet people would really push back on that. Some folks see those names as part of their heritage.
The article knows it would be a tough process,
Yeah.
both practically and emotionally, but they argue that it's a necessary step.
If they really want to face their past and build a better future.
Exactly. They suggest replacing those Confederate names with names of Texan heroes who weren't involved in slavery, people who represent a more positive and unified vision of Texas history.
That makes sense. So it's not about erasing history. It's about being more thoughtful about which parts of history we choose to highlight.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that symbols have power, and the names we give to our streets and parks send a strong message about who we are as a community and what we value.
Yeah. This is giving me a lot to think about. What do you think are the pros and cons of doing something as big as renaming a whole neighborhood?
Well, the benefits are pretty clear. Renaming River Plantation and its streets would be a huge symbolic gesture. It would show that the community is serious about acknowledging past harms and making things right.
Hmm.
It could also send a message to people from marginalized groups that they belong there and their history matters.
That's important.
But the challenges are big, too. Like you said, some residents might resist changing the names.
Yeah.
There's also the logistical headache of updating maps and signs and records.
Right, yeah.
And then there's the cost. It wouldn't be cheap.
So it wouldn't be easy.
Mm.
But the article seems to be saying that it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, they frame it as a matter of justice, of correcting past mistakes and creating a fairer society for everyone.
No matter who they are or where they come from.
Exactly. It's a call to action. They're urging the community to go beyond just talking about these issues and actually do something about them.
Okay. So let's say you lived in River Plantation and you knew everything we've talked about today. Where would you stand on this whole renaming issue? Would you want things to change, or would you rather just keep things the way they are?
That's a tough one. It's a decision each person has to make for themselves. There's no easy answer.
Oh.
But I do think this deep dive has given us all a lot to consider. Not just about River Plantation, but about our own communities, too. Like, what hidden histories are shaping our lives without us even knowing it?
This whole thing about River Plantation makes you think about how we handle difficult history in general.
Yeah, for sure.
The article actually compares it to how Germany dealt with its Nazi past.
Yeah, they say, if Germany can move on from its dark past and pave over Hitler's house and ban swastikas, so can Conroe.
Wow. That's a pretty strong comparison.
It is. It makes us think about how far we're willing to go to face our own uncomfortable truths.
It really does. I mean, imagine you lived in River Plantation, knowing everything we've talked about today. Would you want to change things?
That's a tough one. There's no right answer. But I think this conversation has given us a lot to think about. Not just about River Plantation, but about where we live, too. Like, what's hidden in our own towns.
That's so true. I'm definitely feeling inspired to do some digging into the history of where I live.
Yeah, I think everyone listening should do the same. Look into your local history. Talk to people who've lived there a long time. You never know what you might find.
And maybe even get involved in making your community a better place for everyone.
Exactly.
Well, this has been an amazing deep dive. Thanks for walking us through all of this.
My pleasure.
And to everyone listening, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep pushing for a better world. Until next time, keep diving deep.